the General Practice Podcast from Ockham Healthcare, supporting innovation in general practice.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with Practice Index, and we talk about the new approach to CQC inspections. Practice Index helps you to feel confident and fully prepared for your CQC visit. CQC Manager, part of the compliance package in the Practice Index hub, ensures you have everything you need in one secure location for the inspector to review. Start building your portfolio of evidence today. Book a demo at practiceindex.co.uk. I'm joined today by Robyn Clark and Ed Kennedy. Welcome to the podcast, both. We're actually in the third heat wave of the year when we're recording this. How are you both coping with the heat?
It's not great. We're just about coping here. It's about 32 degrees at the moment, and I'm starting to feel very sticky.
You know, I try to keep quiet when people ask me this question because I'm sat in my lovely air-conditioned building.
Oh. There's always one. There's always one that's got air conditioning.
At least it's not your air-conditioned room within the building, Ed, as the manager.
No, it's the whole building. But I must say, that walk from the car to the building was quite hot.
It's interesting, when it comes to practice estates. Did you pick up recently that Penny Dash, who's the chair of NHS England, said that GP practices have twice as much floor space as they need?
We picked up on that, yes, Ben.
Did you? What did you make of that?
Well, we actually released a statement in response to that to say that we did not find that kind of rhetoric particularly helpful. And actually, when you look at various other data gathering exercises, that actually shows that most general practices are actually fit to bursting, and the investment in general practice estate is incredibly poor compared to other parts of the NHS. So we have reached out to Penny, and we did get a response from her, bless her, so thanks for that, to just say, actually, we'd like to talk to you about this in more detail, because I think you'll find that's not actually the case. But if there is some work being planned to be done around looking at estates in the future neighbourhood developments and whatnot, then we'd love to be a part of those conversations, because we have lots of members with lots of things to say.
The community was quite wound up by it. It was her finger in the air estimate of primary care estate. It didn't go down very well in GP land.
No, it's just a disservice, isn't it? Because it's not even just the amount of estate, which is clearly a problem in itself, and people have been talking about it for many years, but it's the quality of estate and the lack of investment in the estate over such a prolonged period. To then say you've got more than you need, it's a tough comment. Well, we are talking today about the CQC inspection. So it's kind of changed, hasn't it? And it's not just like the way they do visits has changed. It's like the whole approach has changed. What do you think are the main parts of the change you think important for practice and practice managers?
Not everything has changed. So that they've brought out a new approach for practices that were inspected and given a good or outstanding award within a set period. And I know Ed's going to talk a bit more about that process. Practices who don't fit in that will still have a full inspection, but also CQC have been seeking engagement and consultation on a new sort of assessment framework for that new full inspection as well. So we've kind of got like two new branches available, one of which has started, which is the new focus one for the good and outstanding practices, and one which hasn't started yet. And I think that consultation closes very soon. But I know that there's been a lot of talk amongst practice managers about what either of those kind of looks like. And I know Ed's had his recent one, so I'm sure he's got plenty to say about how that went.
Yeah, the IGPM did put in a comments and response to the changes to the larger inspection framework, which we're yet to see. But we do have some concerns about the direction there. They want to make CQC inspections more sector specific, which we welcome. We think that GP surgery should be inspected differently than hospitals. However, they've lumped us in with community trusts. You can't compare a two-partner practice with a practice manager to a huge community trust. So a little bit worried about the work which might be involved with providing evidence for this future framework, which we're yet to see. But yes, in the meantime, because CQC have been so behind, they've tried to design something to help speed up their inspections, which is this return to good and outstanding.
So tell us how it came about and what your experience of that actually was.
We, as the IGPM and as practice managers generally, we didn't know that this change was coming. And we all received an email on one Wednesday evening back in March saying that they are going to be doing this new inspection, an inspection which is going to be reduced in focus. So instead of looking at the 30 domains, they were just going to look at 10. For me, Wickham Surgery, we looked at this email on the Wednesday evening. we had an email from CQC the following morning, so less than one day later, saying, congratulations, we're coming out to inspect you under this new regime. And instead of the normal 2 weeks notice, you get 5 days.
So Ed had a breakdown at that point.
Yeah.
And I don't blame him to not even be able to process this new thing is coming. And then the very next day get told, and you're having one, was a massive shock, wasn't it? And you're a very busy practice as it is. Plus, Ed was already in the process of trying to organize our first IGPM conference. And it was just like, this is the typical life of a practice manager, is you get 1 second of potential peace and something comes along to ruin it.
These assessments include a site visit, don't they? But not necessarily with a GP specialist advisor.
Yeah, that's right. I'll come on to that in just a moment. But I think what we were surprised about was that there was no consultation behind this, at least not least with practice managers. As you rightly said, Ben, this is actually a non-clinical inspection. They actually only require the practice manager to be present on the day of inspection. You know, what we're sort of dubbing is a practice manager inspection. It would have been nice if we'd been included in some of the consultation around that, so that we could have helped inform practice managers why it's happening and what to expect. But sadly, that didn't happen. But there are some, I want to be fair to CQC. There are some good things about this. First of all, the inspection itself is much more focused. It's much smaller. They're only looking at the 10 instead of the 30. So the actual day should be faster, should be more efficient. And that was certainly the case here at Wickham Surgery.
So you know what those 10 statements are in advance?
Yeah, for us, they announced that they were coming. And then I think actually at the same time, they told us what the 10 domains they're going to be looking at were. And they also told us that it would be non-clinical, and they weren't expecting to look at any other domains unless they found something on the day which alarmed them, in which case they'd come back and do a full inspection and look at all the domains. So we knew all of that from the out, which was positive. And the CQC team themselves who came out were nothing but professional. And in my opinion, on the inspection we had, they were trying to look for good. And it also suggests, because, Ben, for a few years now, they've been doing these checks in the background, these sort of CQC searches, looking at things remotely, looking at your QoF data and some other searches that they run in the background, so that they can sort of assess your risk from afar. If you've been announced that they're going to give you one of these inspections, it means that at least that they're deeming you low risk even before they come in. They're expecting you to remain good or remain outstanding if you happen to be an outstanding practice. So I think those things are positive and those things are good. What the IGPM and some of our practice manager colleagues have some more concerns about is one of the things I found out actually after the inspection is that you actually can't use this opportunity to move ratings. If you wanted to demonstrate excellence, or if you wanted to move from good to outstanding, these inspections will not be an opportunity to do that. If you want to do that, you'd have to ask CQC to come in and conduct a full inspection. Now, as much as some practices, may wish to demonstrate how good they are, I don't know many practice managers who would welcome a further CQC inspection for an all-day visit to go for everything. So realistically, these inspections aren't an opportunity to move ratings.
Majority of practices are rated good anyway, aren't they?
Yeah.
So it's like saying, okay, you're already rated good. We think you're going to stay rated good, but we recognize you haven't been there for a long time. So we're going to come. We can't actually change your rating from good to anything else. But does it feel like a tick box exercise, or does it actually feel it's helpful?
It's a really good question, because somebody always has to go first, and we're one of the first practices to do it. And we're really proud as practice managers. We're really proud of what we do, and we really want to demonstrate excellence in areas where we think we're doing well. I would have approached the inspection differently had I known exactly what it would have involved. And I probably would have treated it more as a tick box exercise, knowing that really they're just coming in to make sure everything's still okay. And then they're going to go away and leave a report, which was about 3 paragraphs long. So I think it felt more tick box. But there was good to that as well. If CQC are coming in, it's a shorter inspection and it's more tick box. Loads of practice managers and surgeries will welcome that. It's a shorter exercise, I guess could be seen as a good thing. But I do think there was a missed opportunity there for those practices who haven't been inspected for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. There's a missed opportunity there for them to be able to demonstrate and have it sort of externally validated, because we don't get that often, through an agency like CQC to say, yeah, that's excellent, that's outstanding, because that won't be in their report.
How does that make you feel, Robyn? Like, are you thinking, well, maybe I don't need to worry so much about it? Or is it like, oh, if I get the call saying in 5 days they're coming, it's still very anxiety inducing and doesn't actually help knowing that things can't actually get any better from a rating?
This program is only from practices who were last inspected between 2017 and 2022, and mine was last done in 2016. So I'm getting a full one anyway, whenever that call actually eventually comes. Having spoken to Ed about his experience and what it was like, the fact that it feels like it's very much a practice manager inspection would make me equally just as nervous. They're basically looking at how well run your practice is and how the running of the practice leads to all of the good and outstanding work that's then coming through. So I don't think I'd feel any less pressure. I think I'd probably feel more stressed about the short notice and the less time to prepare for it, essentially, as well. And then for the full inspection with the new framework that's been out for consultation, like Ed said, I thought actually this is a really good opportunity because we're expecting that call any day almost. I'm going to look through this framework and I'm going to do a self-assessment against it for my own practice. And there were a few things in there where I was just like, nope, that's not general practice. That doesn't apply to us. That's a different kind of primary care organisation. But it's also then having the confidence to say, no, that doesn't apply to us. Whereas I think there'll be other managers or CQC registered managers out there who will be stressing about how do I demonstrate that? Because I don't see that requirement reflected in my contract or the work that we do. So it's just putting all of those different elements of primary care together might be helpful for the inspecting team, but isn't necessarily helpful for the provider because it's very nuanced for how we operate. I did like in that new framework that some of it was very clear about what it is that the inspector should be looking for, and it sort of steers you on how you could evidence those compliance in those objectives to those different levels. But the one thing that we hear constantly from all members who've been inspected, whether it's this new model or a full inspection, is inconsistency amongst inspectors still exists. And that is often the biggest stress point around the whole CQC process is, what one practice manager is told is an example of excellent care, another practice manager is told isn't sufficient or isn't important. And we had some feedback recently, didn't we, where we had one practice told that anything that they were doing in their PCN was not relevant to their inspection. But then we've had another practice who was praised for the collaborative working from within the PCN, and that was used in their report to demonstrate really good care. So it's just those inconsistencies as well that make it really difficult for us to know, like, even if I feel confident, it all comes down to who I get on the day.
And I think the new framework, Robyn, from the work we did on that when we were submitting our response to it, is that actually there's going to be even more sort of inspector judgment feeding into the ratings, which will feel for many as an unfair and inconsistent way to inspect. And you're right, Robyn, that's probably the strongest feedback we get from members is the injustice from what feels like not measuring apples with apples.
Did it feel like a practice manager inspection on the day when it happened?
Yes. Well, it felt like a practice manager inspection when they said that only the practice manager was needed to attend. In our case, we actually had our registered manager, who's a GP, attend because they wanted to be there, and they are the registered manager, so they should be there, in our opinion. But that wasn't required from CQC. And as Robyn said, all of the areas they're looking at, HR, staff training, policies, leadership development, succession planning, all of this stuff really falls under the remit of the practice manager. Absolutely right. You get less notice and the whole inspection is looking at what you do in your role, as opposed to with that full inspection. The practice manager always has a heavy role with the CQC, of course, but at least that when there's a full inspection, it's more of a camaraderie and more of a team approach to gain that rating, whatever that is, good or bad. I did say to the inspectors that this is a practice manager inspection. They did not agree with that framing. They said that effectively the practice manager oversees lots of the regulation and therefore they're the right person for them to speak to.
Anything else that was surprising or different about the inspections to, other experiences you've had of it?
It is more light touch, but the bits they're looking at, you have to really make sure you've nailed because they're asking for less evidence. So they've sort of got more time to go through those bits. We've spoken about this before, Ben, in terms of the practice manager role being isolating. In the IGPM, we have a new sort of tool called Safe House, where practice managers can reach out in confidence to speak about issues they have. And sadly, that tool is used quite a lot. I do worry that with the way these now the sort of our regulatory partners are focusing more on the practice manager, that there's just going to be more pressure on this one role. And they're still using the one word ratings, and that's not changed from these new inspections or within the new frameworks. You may remember, Ben, the tragic death of the head teacher, Ruth Perry, following a poor Ofsted inspection because there was so much pressure on the head teacher for these inspections. I really, really worry about the pressure that practice managers put on themselves with these inspections. I really do. I'm hoping that CQC will recognize some of that. I mean, personally, just in the IGPM, out of our board members, I think Robyn's the only person who hasn't had an inspection over the last 18 months or so.
I've never had one, Ed. 8
Okay.
years as a PM, well, 9 years this year, and I've still not had
incredible.
one. So I'm absolutely terrified.
But for those of us who have had one, we have all been exhausted afterwards, knackered, having to take some time off work to recover. So yes, these are more light touch, but they're still exhausting. And in 5 days, you can't get everything ready in 5 days. In the new frameworks, we're going to be inspected in the same way community trusts are, who've got huge teams of compliance managers and back officers. I am worried that the pressure on what are still relatively small organizations is not going to go away anytime soon.
So having been through it, have you got any advice then for practice managers who are thinking, oh, this sounds like it could be really tough? What to do now in terms of just making sure that they are ready, but at the same time maintaining some level of mental health?
Yeah, and I think one of the things, which is one of the lovely things about working in general practice, is that we're not in competition with each other. And lots of us have now gone through these inspections. And I would say pick up the phone to one of your practice manager colleagues in your area or in your network or through the IGPM or through any channels you have. We've got a really active CQC WhatsApp group in the IGPM. And actually, we just help each other out and we say, this is what they picked up and this was the bit which was missing. And they were looking at this. And that peer-to-peer support is really good, both in prep for the inspection, but also sort of as an offload mental health kind of element to that as well. But really, they're looking at the things which you as a practice manager have control over. I would say go through all of your HR files, all of your staff files, make sure that everything's there and there's nothing missing. There's lots of resources online. You can look at what they're looking for in terms of those HR files. But it's the stuff which actually we should be quite familiar with, making sure that we've got references for people, we've got DBSs for people, right to work in the UK. All of this stuff, just make sure it's all nice and up to date. Looking at your significant event processes, any learning you do as an organization, all the boring stuff. It might be interesting for some people. I find it quite boring, but I know it's an important part of our role. Making sure all of our policies and procedures are up to date and reviewed. Staff training matrix. I would say, Ben, that the staff training is something which I think right now would be a good opportunity for practice managers and practices to look at, because if that isn't up to date, in the old days, we had 2 weeks. You could do quite a lot of catching up. But when you've got 5 days and you've got 10, 20, 30, 40 members of staff, you might not have time to make sure everyone gets through their staff training. So you might just want to see where you're up to with that, with the mandatory staff training, and make sure that you're close to having all of your staff members through that.
Compliance is obviously the biggest issue. So for me as well, it's just about making sure you know where everything is and that your staff kind of know as well. Like, so in my PCN, one of our sort of PCN objectives was to see what we could do collectively around CQC preparation. And so we don't reinvent the wheel and that we learn from each other's experience. And so we've done things like we've created like a little staff briefing note. So, when we get the call, we send that round to all staff and say, right, they're coming. This is kind of what an inspection looks like. This is what they might come and talk to you about. And then a reminder of all the key things that we hear that they often ask, do our staff know how to whistleblow or who our freedom to speak up guardian is? Do our staff know how to report a safeguarding concern? Have they read their most up-to-date safeguarding policy? Where would they find it? So we've done quite a lot of work in the practice in terms of prep to make sure that the staff are also aware about what's going to happen. In one of our training afternoons, we did like a little CQC quiz and a treasure hunt. I've never seen so many staff running around my building trying to find the snow shovel so quickly. But it's just things like that keep it fresh in people's minds as well. Like I said, I've been nearly 9 years without an inspection, and I'm totally jinxing myself now because I bet you I'd get the call tomorrow. But it doesn't mean that I haven't spent 9 years not being ready. So it's just making sure that you're constantly reviewing your processes and your protocols, and that it's always just kind of in the back of people's minds. What what does this mean for CQC compliance? When we've done something really, really good, would I want to showcase that if we were being inspected? And how do I make sure that I remember that that's happened? So make use of tools that exist as well, like Ed said, where you can keep tabs on everything, because that's really, really beneficial.
And Practice Index have quite a few of those resources, don't they?
Yes, yeah. So there's a whole compliance manager package, I think, on the hub, which is really, really good at just linking things through a CQC evidence, and you can do a CQC self-assessment through it. And obviously your policies are in there as well. So it's trying to make life easier for yourself where you can.
I would say one of the other interesting things about this latest inspection is to be prepared that your inspection team may not be from primary care. We had 3 inspectors on our light touch inspection, and all 3 of them didn't have a primary care background. And also they may not have a clinical background either, which means the evidence they're looking for and you're compiling for them will be things which they would look for in other healthcare organizations as well. So they spend quite a lot of time looking for our infection control. They wanted to make sure they were up to date with our cost sheets and that, we had records of all of our cleaning. So it's making sure you can evidence everything. If it's not written down, as far as CQC are concerned, it's not done or it doesn't exist. So they're not going to be looking at specific things necessarily to do with primary care, but more about how we stay safe as an organization, if you like. And that is slightly different to previous inspections. One of our frustrations or things we hear from members is that some people can get wound up if the people inspecting you haven't done your job or haven't worked in a GP surgery. But it's not really worth wasting energy on those kind of concerns. You're better off just being prepared for whoever turns up on the day to be able to give them the evidence that they need. And I must say, because I'm trying to be fair to CQC, the 3 inspectors we had were, whilst they hadn't worked in a GP surgery before, were very professional and they were trying to look for examples of good. And I didn't feel like they were trying to catch us out.
And it doesn't have to end on the day either, does it, Ed? We've heard a lot of members recently saying that when they've had their reports through, they've found inaccuracies or things that they've wanted to challenge, and CQC have been receptive to that.
Yeah.
So they have been able to come back and say, I think you may not have understood what it is that we do here. Actually, this is what we mean, and here's some evidence to back that up. And then the CQC have updated that report accordingly. And I know when Kay Keane was on the podcast, Ben, a while back after her full inspection, that was also something that she did. She challenged some of the things in the report, which actually ended up changing the rating that her practice got. So yeah, don't feel like, if at the end of the day they don't understand and it's not going to come out fairly, you do have an ability to sort of challenge what comes out in that report if you feel it is detrimental or really unfair. So it's not the end of it once they've left for the day and the inspection's complete.
Yeah, Kay did explain how they went through that whole process of appealing against the result that came in. So we'll link that up in the show notes. If people missed that, it is definitely
Really
worth,
good episode,
definitely worth a listen. I can't let you go now you're mentioning Kay, Ed, because I understand that you recently went to give evidence at the House of Commons Public Bill Committee.
Yeah, so Ed went along in support as well. So Ed could give you a bit more info on the topic of the day. But I sat and watched it on the YouTube video after, and I thought it was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it was an amazing day, and Kay did a phenomenal job. They approached the IGPM because they wanted a practice manager view on the NHS bill and any areas which might affect primary care, good or bad. And they're sort of, particularly interested in the having a one patient record and, whether GP should continue and general practice should continue being the data holder for patients. So really important stuff. And Kay did a really good job sort of, talking about the workload involved and the practicalities on the ground. And the MPs found that really helpful. But what I think is incredible, really, is that they recognize now just how important the role is of the practice manager in terms of the business and operations of primary care and general practice, and that they want to hear our views, the absolute highest level of influencing policy. And I think that's a change, Ben, to a few years ago, and one which we think is a really positive change because, of course, our clinical colleagues have an extremely important voice when it comes to primary care. But actually, that managerial leadership, business and operational voice is also really important. And at the end of the day, whatever comes, it's going to be us who has to try and make the policy work on the ground. I don't know if you've seen it, Ben. Kay's evidence was absolutely fantastic. But yeah, it was brilliant.
Feels like yesterday, but I'm sure it was many years ago now. But to go from, please listen to us, we have something to say, to being asked to give evidence in this way, it does seem to mark a kind of watershed in like almost like the standing of practice managers and how their voice is recognised.
Absolutely. And yeah, I don't think I could be more proud. And also, I keep having these pinch me moments because I think in the last 12 months, things have escalated so fast. You know, like you said, Ben, it was what, 5 years ago that we set up, 4 years ago that we launched accreditation. And now we've kind of achieved all the things that we set out to achieve. You know, we wanted to have professionalization of our role. We got that through our accreditation program and the professional register. We wanted to be consulted with on contract changes that we need to know about because we have to operationally implement them. And we got that last year, and we want for that to continue. So to continue to have these relationships and to have our expertise called on is absolutely phenomenal. And I think what we're seeing from members as well is a real recognition that actually this is a professional role. It's very niche, it's very nuanced, but it is something that is very important, very senior, lots of responsibility and accountability attached to it, and an integral part of the running of the NHS. So it's just fantastic to see that becoming more and more recognised, and for more and more members to join and to also want to get accredited and to join that professional register as well is just very heartwarming. And I'm very, very proud and really pleased to have been a big part of that.
Well, congratulations to you both. I think it's fantastic. Thanks for coming on today. Thanks, Ed, for sharing your experiences of your visit. And Robyn, I hope the visit isn't just around the corner.
I'll let you know if it is. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
In this episode, we explore the new CQC inspection, which focuses on the non-clinical side of the practice. Effective preparation can help make the day a little less stressful. And Practice Index has everything you need to ensure you are fully compliant. The must-have CQC handbook will walk you through what to expect, and CQC Manager, part of the compliance package in the Practice Index Hub, will help you to collate all of the evidence you need in one secure location for the inspector to review. Practice management is a very challenging job, but you're never alone. In the Practice Index Forum, you can ask questions and gain help and support from your peers. This can be on CQC or anything practice management related. Find out more at practiceindex.co.uk.
The General Practice Podcast from Ockham Healthcare, supporting innovation in general practice.